I want to do a quick visual and audio check. If you wouldn't mind in your questions pane, if you can, just give me a little bit of feedback. Make sure that you can hear me. Okay, starting to get some feedback here. All right, excellent. Looks like things are working. Good. Good deal. All right, again, welcome everyone. I know we're going to get others that are going to be still moseying on in here as we get rolling here, but I want to get up and get running and get going on this wonderful topic of refrigerants. As we all know, at one point in time, air conditioning was probably one of the last technology areas that didn't change a whole lot, and we know we can no longer say that that's the case. In fact, air conditioning systems are really not going to be air conditioning systems anymore. They are going to become thermal management systems. They're in charge of more than just making the occupants comfortable. If you know, on a hybrid vehicle, that's the case. And it's going to be more that way, and we're going to see a tremendous amount of change coming in these systems. So I titled tonight's session Refrigerant Roundabout for a couple of different reasons. I mean, maybe some of you on the East Coast are more familiar with what driving roundabouts are, but that's kind of how refrigerants are. They come in, they go out. Some show great promise, then they never materialize. Some end up being dangerous. We hear all kinds of different things. But anyway, it's a situation that we have to stay on top of because it's no longer going to be just an R-134a world like it used to be. So, and then the other part of a roundabout is it's either not direct, it's not simple, clear, or plain, long, and confusing. Well, it's probably all of the above. And, you know, again, we've seen a lot of change, and we're going to continue to see a lot of change as this topic continues to move. So without further ado, let me introduce you to tonight's webinar team. I start with Dan Baumhart. He's our Manager of Light Vehicle Test Development. He's my wingman tonight, co-moderating the session. My name is Dave Kappert, and I'll serve as tonight's webinar presenter. Among other things, I provide Section 609 program support here at ASE. That includes both the print booklet and the online version. All right, let's just go over the online interface here real quickly so that we all know where our controls are at. On your left, you have the viewer window, which is where the content that I'm going to display tonight is going to appear. And over on right, you have your control panel. What's of most importance in terms of interacting with us here, since we don't have audio communications with this many people, is the questions pane. That's how you can interact with us, let us know what's on your mind. We'll get to a question session a little bit later. And so by all means use it. We'd like to make this an interactive session. And of course, just make sure that your speakers are turned up. Some of you have said that you're having a little bit of a problem hearing me. Others say that you sound good, but it looks like the majority say I sound good. So you may have some issues on your end as well. Let me try here once, see if I can just check my audio settings just to make sure that I'm where I need to be. All right, I don't know if that's any better for everybody. I got a little bit of a gain change here. And good. Okay, we got some people on portable devices out there. Good. All right. Seems to have made a difference. Thank you for your patience, everyone. Okay, speaking of mobile devices, I just want to talk about them for a second. I know that some of you have joined us on them, and probably by now, if you're actually in this session, you've already got the app up and running. That's important because you don't want to be trying to run this inside of a browser on a mobile device. So your device probably, when you tried to log in, would prompt you if you didn't have the app installed. But if not, on your respective device, if you're on Apple, go to the App Store, and on an Android device, go to Google Play. I don't want to say any more about the apps, but what I do want to remind you about is that if your data coverage is a premium to you, you may want to consider turning on your Wi-Fi adapter and connect to Wi-Fi if it's available to you so you don't have to pay for data during the session. All right, now just a little bit of some background information about this webinar quickly. I know it goes without saying that information is subject to change, but especially in this topic. There's things that are happening at this very moment that continue to unfold. This is the best garnering of different pieces of information that we've picked up. ASE does have a Section 609 authorized program that it runs from the EPA. We've been doing that since 1992. We are currently in a revision cycle on that. So we are obligated by federal law to make sure that our program matches what's required. But there's things outside the lines of the regulations as well that apply to the vehicle technology themselves. This is not going to be a forum for debate on refrigerants and regulations. I'm not going to argue the merits of one refrigerant being better than another. I mean, that's really for the industry to do, and somehow I think that'll all play out in terms of what will probably be used and, you know, will ultimately be in your hands. I think that's where it really comes down to, is what's going to be in your hands and what do you need to do to get ready for that. And as well, we're not going to debate environmental science related to greenhouse gases, global warming, or the ozone layer. You know, the way I kind of look at it is, again, just getting back to the EPA, we're governed by things that we need to tell technicians to do, and we do that within those confines, and so we're just trying to be a medium in between, you know, that side of it and the industry to some extent. Okay, so just a little bit of an overview of tonight's section. We're going to get into a little bit of recap on Section 609. Something on the refrigerant transitions. For those of you that know any German, I'm really not going to do it, but I'm headed somewhere with this. Sprechen Sie CO2, and then where we're headed. I also want to talk about buyer beware on R-134a. I mean, 134a is still out there, well entrenched, and will continue to be for some time to come. We'll also pass along some resources to you, and then we'll take your questions. Okay, the Refrigerant Recovery and Recycling Regs were first released back in 1992, at least on a federal level. And at that time, of course, everything was R12, and all of those regulations date back to depletion of the ozone layer. That's what was first the regulatory driving force behind the Refrigerant Recovery and Recycling Program. Again, we've been authorized by EPA since then and continue to be. But throughout those years, of course, we've seen a lot of change. The interesting thing about the equation of working on a motor vehicle for hire, what is in federal law called for consideration, which means being paid for or bartered, okay, means that you have to have a training and certification qualifications, such as ASE Section 609 program, and the certified equipment that's met standards that have been adopted by the US EPA. All of the systems, all the equipment and containers must have unique fittings. That's all by design, so as to discourage any cross-contamination. We know that cross-contamination still happens, but that is the way it is. Every refrigerant out there is going to have a set of unique fittings on it, and thus the coupler, service equipment, so on and so forth down the line. At this point in time, a Section 609 credential does not expire, but I don't want to say that that's always going to be the case. Also, as a note on that, if you were to look at the credential that we offered back in 1992 as opposed to now, and what we'll also be offering more than likely later this year when we update our program, you'll see that the content varies drastically, starting with only R12 and now moving up through some of the refrigerants we're going to talk about tonight, including 1234YF. So let's just look at applications real quick. This visual I think is nice. I borrowed this from the US EPA. They came up with a nice fact sheet that breaks it down, is that if you work on this, this is what really applies. So it's pretty simple. Passenger cars, it's a 609 program. Buses, if it cools the inside but it's not R22 refrigerant, that's a 609 program. Trucks, off-road vehicles like tractors, it could be dump trucks, other things like that. As long as they're really largely in charge of occupant comfort, that's really what it comes down to. The dividing line is when you get into vehicles like trains, aircraft, and you can see the rest of them on your screen, and those are really going to be 608 applications, of which there are 4 different varieties of. And ASE's program, again, is a 609 application which in the spirit of the law is for motor vehicle air conditioning systems. Okay, speaking of regulations and requirements real quick, we've had a recent change in law in the state of Wisconsin. On April 18th, Wisconsin Assembly Bill 695 was passed that repealed the state license requirement for businesses performing ASE work. Prior to that date, there was a program that was run underneath the Department of Agriculture, Trade, and Consumer Protection, and technicians and shops had to oblige by that. That is no longer the case. So technicians don't need to follow what's going on with the state program, but what you do need to have is you need to have federal 609 coverage. And since 609 coverage goes a long ways, we don't know whether you may already have coverage. And if you wanted to check and see if you did, if you're in the state of Wisconsin, our customer service number. And then also we offer as a service Max Worldwide's number on the screen. And just want to mention the reason that we also have that up there. At one point there was an organization called IMACA, and they've adopted their records. So if you find that you don't, it's real easy. We do offer our program online. It's real easy to take at that URL of asecampus.com. Okay, so now refrigerant transitions. What have we seen? Well, obviously 12 to 134, which was an ozone depletion potential issue. So we thought that we had that fixed. And then, of course, now things move in the other direction. By the way, the ozone layer, I guess, is rumored now to be repaired, healing itself to some extent, perhaps by these actions. I believe the NASA estimates it's somewhere around 2050 is what they're currently claiming. But the 134a changeover was complete by model year 1995, and things became fairly quiet then for a while. It was expected that R12 to 134a was going to be a big retrofitting issue and the permeability hoses and that, but that never really happened. So it was a relatively smooth transition overall, and really over the years, 134a has proven to be a good performer. I think that's kind of hard to refute. The only thing about it is now with the focus on greenhouse gases, it has a relative number of 1,430, which isn't so good, since like the European Union has set an arbitrary number of anything above 150 not being good. So 134a is probably not such a good chemical now, with the environmental focus switching over to greenhouse gases rather than ozone depletion. So what does that mean? Okay, if we look at 1234YF, with a current environmental scorecard of 4 for global warming potential, of course 0 for ozone depleting, and what's mentioned on screen is the indirect and direct greenhouse gas factors. What this means is that with the use of 1234 in a system, there are direct greenhouse gas parts, elements in the overall equation, and then there's also indirect. The direct are what the factor is by the gas itself, and the indirect is the amount of fuel, say, to drive the compressor, the amount of CO2. You take that and you add it up, and they come up with this number. 1234 is SNAP approved by EPA. It has been for a while now. And even though it is the kind of heir apparent at this time as far as where refrigerants are going, it is not going to phase out R134a. It's really a phase down. You will see systems slowly coming online with 1234. I believe there's 9 this year for 13 and 14. And this is really all about fuel economy credits. That's kind of the incentive that's been given to the car manufacturers. More of a carrot than it is with a stick as in Europe, where it's done by mandate. Here it's a little softer than that. So when the car manufacturers buy into using 1234, they get some CO2 grams per mile credits, which does them good for fuel economy credits. Just a quick scan of this chart, and you can see that 134 and 1234 really have very similar pressure-temperature relationships. So 1234 coming along not being a drop-in replacement, but being very similar in operation, you could see that the technology for ASE could be kept quite similar than what it had been with 134a, its predecessor. All right, so let's just talk about 1234 identification and fittings here. We've got, it's coming right now in a 10-pound cylinder. Honeywell is a manufacturer. All of the fittings are covered under SAE J639 with quick coupler. It has its own unique label. Price estimate right now somewhere in the range of $65 to $156 a pound. At the Max convention, it was cited at $9.73 an ounce at retail price. So that's a little bit spending. Originally, I think it was forecast at 10 times the cost of 134A. Now remember, these are initial prices when the refrigerant is just starting to hit the street. The manufacturing is estimated to come up largely over what the one plant is that is currently manufacturing. So we're going to see this come online as the industry start to switch. It is not a retrofit refrigerant. It's an OE refrigerant. So you're not going to put 1234 into a 134 car. Okay, PAG is the oil. You can see a system label in front of you. Reverse retrofitting, such as putting 134 in a 1230 car. 1234 car is, I'm just going to say at this point, just say no. It's been discussed, but that's going to be frowned upon. I know there are some technical restrictions about if a system is empty, you can, and this or that, but remember, all of these systems have their own fittings and label. And again, DuPont and Honeywell is the sole manufacturer. If you study the 1234 label that's in front of you, you'll see that they're getting a little bit more sophisticated with the system labels. I mean, we've got the system charge amount, of course, the refrigerant that was in it, and the oil. But we're starting to see more specific SAE standards here. 2845 applies to technician certification. 2842 is for the evaporator. There is now a new evaporator standard that applies to both 1234 systems and to R744 systems, or CO2. There's a standard that governs that. And then J639 is the governing document that gets into all the fittings and everything else underneath it. It's been expanded dramatically over the years. You also see that we've got a little technician with a ribbon for requiring certification, that this has a flammability quality to it, and of course use caution. So here's what we're aware of as far as current 1234YF vehicles. Now, one of the things I just want to say is that this can depend on production date. For example, some of the vehicles on that list, we did a photo shoot and we were underneath the hood of some of those vehicles and they did not yet have 1234YF. So there's probably a running change that they're going to make depending on whenever that happens. And I did talk to one of the climate control managers for one of the manufacturers that's on the screen, who told me that he couldn't even tell you exactly when they were switching from one to the other at some different point, because it's quite random as they're going through this the whole production phase. But eventually we'll see it come online on more and more vehicles. Okay, let's talk just a little bit about CO2 or R744. Obviously, it's all around us. It's what we exhale. It's naturally occurring. It's not chemical-based. It definitely requires higher pressures for operation. It was initially favored by the German automakers back in the middle 2000s, I think it was. They went down that road for a while to meet the European Commission directive of, again, being underneath a 150 global warming potential factor. And back in September of 2012, Daimler made quite a bit of controversy and some noise about a vehicle that they claimed had been in an accident, and there was a flammability issue with the fill of 1234YF, which then initiated an investigation on Daimler's behalf and also from various vehicle associations, some in Europe. Also, Society of Automotive Engineers got involved. DuPont was involved. A number of different entities were involved to see about this claim of flammability, that it was that much of a concern. And So at the time it was ruled that further testing was required, and Daimler had stopped using it for a little bit and put 134 actually back in a few cars, and then said it was going to change direction. Since then, DuPont and SAE have since refuted the claims about the flammability problems with 1234 and have restated through a cooperative research project that 1234YF is in fact safe for use, even though it does have mild flammability traits. So is 744 CO2 viable? Well, I mean, from an environmental standpoint, it's viable, that's for sure, because it's got the lowest of any of the GWPs, it's non-flammable, and it's been used in commercial refrigeration, I should say, for a long, long time. And it has been, SNAP approved or SNAP accepted by EPA, so it is on the current list of accepted alternatives. The one thing I just want to qualify, though, is that the significant new alternatives policy by EPA doesn't really rate the effectiveness of refrigerants. It really has to do with the safety of the use of those refrigerants. So I want to really clarify that, and I'm not stating that to say that CO2 doesn't have viability. I'm just stating that what SNAP is deals more with safety than it does with refrigerant viability in terms of cooling effectiveness and temperature pressure relationships and all that sort of stuff. As you can see here again, if you look at the system label, we've got the same things that we saw on 1234YF, where we've got certification, obviously use caution as you would on any system, the type of oil that's in and what governing standards apply, and then the charge amount. Okay, so let's also talk about here now, I'll just mention a few without an exhaustive review. Any of these is just alternatives to alternatives. R-152a is another accepted refrigerant by EPA under the SNAP program. It's on their current list. It is not in any system right now as a factory fill. It's not available as a retrofit refrigerant, but it could have some merit down the road. It's got very similar refrigeration properties to both 1234 and 134, although it does have higher flammability traits than 1234 does. In some cases, 152 might be used in what's called a secondary loop air conditioning system, where there's actually a chiller involved in between where the refrigerant never enters the passenger compartment. It actually goes and it actually cools what's like a heater core, if you will, and then the liquid, coolant-based type liquid would be recirculated back up through the cabin inside the vehicle with a blower fan and so on and so forth with its own associated heat exchanger to remove heat from the vehicle. So that's one application for how it might be. And then the other two refrigerants that are being experimented with pretty heavily through SAE right now are R-444a and 445a. These are also low global warming potential blends that are being experimented with quite a bit. Again, there's a lot of research that continues to go on out there because of 1234 just getting into the marketplace, the industry perhaps being interested in more than one type of refrigerant that might be out there. So these blends continue to go and have another look. One interesting thing about the blends that you got to be careful with is that when there's mild, any type of system leakage, mild leakage or whatever, when a blend leaks, it doesn't leak equally, so it affects the ratio or the percentages of the blend inside that system. So with that type of service, it's more than likely what you'll do is a complete recharge. You pull out what's in there and you will fill it up with, the refrigerant of having the proper, percentages just as was intended when it was designed. And it's also likely that we could see some other blends coming down the road and even some maybe other possible alternatives. There's been a lot of controversy in this, as you've seen, so I would say it's not out of the question. Okay, so where are we headed? Well, obviously we've had Section 609 training and certification going all the way back to 1992. There's going to be revisions to that. Our new program will be coming out and we'll have coverage for R744, R1234. It will have coverage in there a little bit on 152. It's going to talk about the use of the new equipment and the standards that are involved. And at some point, we might even see Section 609 get to where it's going to have some maybe enhanced requirements. If these CO2 systems come to fruition and we start seeing them on the road, the amount of pressure that they're going to have is going to probably require a much greater safety quotient. So we may see a switch in the 609 programs. I don't know if it would be an add-on component to what we already offer that covers all the other refrigerants, or it would be incorporated in the standard program. Right now there's no answer on that, but it's likely that we will see something, especially if CO2 systems do come in to the country here and they become, something that we need to service. Okay, new R3 equipment, refrigerant recovery recycling equipment, to me J2843. That's kind of the governing document that talks about what this equipment is supposed to do and its performance. And it's interesting to note that a system being serviced actually, with 1234 must have a purity level of 98% before one of these machines will even recover it. And it's imperative that with one of these machines that they do a refrigerant identification as part of that. I mean, there's just you can't recover refrigerant from a system with one of these machines unless it uses an identifier that's either built into the machine or connected via USB. Or the integral one is J2927. J2912 is the external. That's the one that has the USB cable on it. But one way or another, whether it's inside or outside, there has to be an identifier that's going to talk with the machine in order to recover refrigerant from it. And then also, because of the change in the chemical, we're also going to see refrigerant leak detectors change. We got 2913 for electronic and 2297 for dye. And all of these standards, by the way, do have some mating standards for technician procedures that are all included in the upcoming material. Okay, now I just want to talk about, again, 134 is still going to be the refrigerant that's out there on the street for some time yet. And because of price point pressures and lots of other things, we're starting to see some contaminated 134a on the street. There's a white paper available from the Air Conditioning, Heating, and Refrigeration Institute that talks about this and what's been found. But cylinders contain all the refrigerants you see on the screen there, ranging all the way from R40 to R12, different blends, so on and so forth, that could really cause you some headaches if you put that into a system. You wouldn't want that to happen. And in today's digital age, where it's easy to just masquerade all kinds of different things, labels and packaging, easy to duplicate. The worst thing for you is it could jeopardize your safety, compromise vehicle systems, so on and so forth, even cause injury if you were to use some of this refrigerant. So you want to be diligent with the refrigerant identifier, but with some caveats here, because no known portable analyzer prior to right around 2012 detects the R40 component. So that's a little bit of a problem. And the white paper that I'm referring to does have a flow chart on how to use maybe some other technologies to work with that. I'll guide you to that in just a minute. And you may be able to use a portable infrared analyzer to check what it exactly is that might be in this cylinder, including halide torch testing or gas chromatography. So it can get pretty involved, and it can get pretty ugly if you use this stuff. Okay, how do you avoid counterfeits? Well, I mean, there's no perfect world, obviously, but know your supplier. The deal seems like it's too good to be true. It probably is. You definitely want to verify anything before you use it, and you don't want to perpetuate the problem if you do run into some of this by passing it on. You want to make sure that you label it and isolate it before you contaminate some systems with it. All right, my intent was to try to give a brief update of where things were at. Again, our program with the new content in it will be out sometime later this year. It's still in for approval with EPA at this moment. So let's see what we got. Dan, what are you seeing?
Dave, Tom was asking about the requirement for new servicing equipment for the 1234YF.
Mm-hmm.
So he was asking, will there be new service equipment required for that?
Right. It has to be design certified to meet J2843, which covers all the different things that that equipment has to do. So there are some machines in the marketplace now, but you're going to start seeing more and more of them come out. Because, I mean, the vehicles are really just starting to hit, you know, some of the dealerships and that now. And we've seen some people step up and say that their, you know, vehicles were going to have it, and then they pulled back, and then they waited. I know Cadillac switched one of its vehicles. They had it, then they didn't have it. I mean, it's coming. So, you know, we're going to try to provide this information to let you know where things are headed. What else do we have, Dan? Anything else that looks like a pattern?
William was asking if there was any idea on price for the equipment. Actually, Cody asked that, and I think the answer to that is it's a question better asked of an equipment supplier than us.
Yeah, it really is. I can't help on that one.
Dave, could you explain the term SNAP? John, I'd seen that. I put it in my notes to ask that again.
Yeah, it's EPA program for Significant New Alternatives Policy. And what they do is when a company wants to bring a refrigerant to market, you know, whether they want to use it on an OE basis or they want to use it in any other way, then they submit it to EPA so it goes through that testing. And as I said earlier, it has to do with safety more than it has to do with effectiveness as a refrigerant. I hope that answers it.
Okay, and then I have a question. Will there be dual refrigerant machines from Nicholas? And the answer to that is will really depend on the manufacturer, but I think maybe the regs cover that too. Does SAE have something in there that you might know of, Dave?
Well, I mean, each side of that machine would have to meet the appropriate standards for that refrigerant, you know, in terms of the performance of that machine and the things that it has to stand up to. Okay, but I have heard about dual refrigerant machines, so I think you'll see those coming.
Okay, and then I had a question from Karen. She's asking that regarding 1234YF, a little bit of a rumor that it's highly toxic to human lung tissue and highly corrosive when exposed to moisture, and asking if that's correct. Is that something you have information on, Dave, or we refer
No, I
them to
don't.
SAE?
I've heard some different arguments about that in terms of, you know, the health issues related to it. What I would suggest you do, and I'm going to, you know, direct you to the to the manufacturer of 1234, and that is DuPont. And there's going to be a link coming up here. I think they have a website. It's smartautoac.com, and they can address that.
Another attendee asked if the fittings are unique to each of the different refrigerants.
Yes, fittings and labels by federal law have to be unique to each one so as to discourage cross-contamination.
Does the 1234YF have a track record, maybe in Europe? Have they been using it longer than we?
Well, it was supposed to go into effect over there by law, and you know, Mercedes started to use it. Others are using it. I can't really speak for the whole European side of the effort, but yeah, they're ahead of us. They are certainly ahead of us. Although Europe has, I'm trying to remember when the European mandate was supposed to go into place. I believe it was at the end of 2012, and since then there's been a delay. There was a lot of controversy. There was a situation where people were buying cars, and because they didn't comply with the European, the MAC directive over there, that they weren't going to be able to register them. Lots of things going on.
Then if you have a contaminated or cross-contaminated vehicle, there's a question about how is a contamination mix collected, and then how is it disposed of. Are you able to address that with the information that you have right now, Dave, or is that something that we need to address later?
Well, that refrigerant has to be reclaimed. It has to be, contained, and so it can be reclaimed. The EPA does list on their site. It's at epa.gov. They list some approved claimers that you can, get in contact with to handle that type of situation. But you want to make sure that if you're going to be doing that, that you do everything in the spirit of the law, because you don't want to, have that kind of responsibility.
And then could you restate what the size of the container for 1234YF is?
10 pounds is what they have out there now.
I had a question from one of the attendees asking if we're able to explain why the transition cannot be as the same as the last change, the example from R12 to 134A. I don't really understand that question. Do you, Dave?
Restate it again, Dan. I'm not sure.
Sure. The question is, they're asking why this transition from 134A to 1234YF cannot be the same as the last change from like R12 to 134A. And I don't quite, I think I'm missing something there in that question, but it might be important.
Well, I think in the prior case, what we had is, there was really more of a heavy mandate going on because of depletion of the ozone layer. So there was a lot of pressure to move to 134. 134 was readily available at that time. This is a little bit more of a soft change to move over. I mean, as we know, we are going to see more emphasis on greenhouse gases going forward. I mean, you've got the new federal fuel economy mandates that require less CO2 coming out of the tailpipe. So every reduction of CO2 is going to be pretty important. So, this one happens on the refrigerant level, and it also happens on the exhaust level when, again, you look at that indirect and direct relationship between the two. But I think it's just a little bit of a different environmental move, but you also here you've got a little bit of a difference with the the refrigerant availability, which has probably caused somewhat of the timing issue.
There was a question asking which one of the systems right now is the 2000 PSI system.
That would be CO2.
CO2, okay.
Or R744. And again, R744, it's a SNAP accepted alternative by EPA. There are no systems automotive-wise that are using it, at least that are on the road at this point. There is no service equipment yet at this point for it. There's a lot of other stuff that needs to be figured out in terms of working with it. But the refrigerant itself is SNAP accepted at this point.
Okay. David asked, what would be the pros and cons of this 1234YF system? Could you answer something to that effect?
The pros and cons of it? Well, obviously, the pros side of it is it's on the environmental side as far as why we're moving to it. When you look at R134a with a global warming potential of 1430, and you look at 1234 with a global warming potential of 4, it's pretty clear to see the difference right there. So, the 134, by the way, is the or I should say more generally, HFCs are the highest chemical that are up right now floating around in the atmosphere that's been detected. So, I'm not saying all that comes out of automotive air conditioning systems, because I think most people have been pretty responsible and use recovery recycling machines. But, through industry and just leakage and other things like that, it's up there, that's for sure. But, the cons, getting back to that for a second, the cons are right now is cost, availability. That's why you're seeing it coming in a handful of cars from the various manufacturers as we move forward.
Dave, could you repeat the cost of the 1234YF and pounds in ounces, or go back to that slide. There's several people asking that question.
Yeah, I can go back to it. Yeah, it was $9.73 an ounce was the price that we heard for it at retail level.
And to repeat, for a lot of folks are asking, is this 1234 YF or 1334? Are we able to retrofit 1234 YF vehicles with 134? And the answer to that was no.
You heard from me. I'm going to say no. I know there are some technicalities in there where that's not the case, but remember, again, every system has its own fittings and labels. So it's not just a matter of putting in the refrigerant. You know, there's some issues where warranty could be in play, a couple other things there. But I think if we start seeing a trend towards people wanting to do that, I think there's going to be something that's going to happen where they'll clamp down on that. But for me, I'm going to say no. You're not allowed to alter that system.
Yep. And then again, we have many people asking the question: is the current 609 certification going to work with the 1234 YF? And then is there an expiration on the current 609? Can we answer that question, Dave?
Yeah, they're kind of related. I mean, at this point, the current certification would still apply to, 1234. But I just want to say that, again, if you were to go back and look at our program in 1992 and saw that it only covered R12, and then were to look at what's coming out again later this year, you're going to find, 4 other refrigerants covered, a lot more detail covered on recovery recycling. So it really is a different thing because EPA hasn't put a superseding factor in it. And so while it's true that it also doesn't expire at this point, that could very well change. My gut is, from discussions I've had with people, again, if we see CO2 systems come in because of the pressures that they work at, I mean, just for example, if you're working on something, say it's 1500 psi, even if a service valve were leaking, and you go to loosen a service cap, I mean, sure, you should have glasses on and everything, but it just changes everything when you're working at those kinds of pressures. Did that answer it?
Do you know if the, yeah, that's fine by me. If 134 YF is going to be available to the general public in retailers out there, similar to the 134 mini cans?
Well, here's what I know, okay? I don't know about the mini cans, okay? But I know early on, the word on the street is that 1234 was going to be regulated for distribution only to service professionals because of something under the Toxic Substance Control Act, because of its mild flammability. The latest thing I've heard is now that that's not the case, but I don't know anything about the availability of small cans because right now they're doing everything they can just to get enough 1234 out in 10-pounders to satisfy demand.
There was a question here. I just lost it. Sorry. Asking about the average high and low pressures, system performance. How does the refrigerant perform in the systems? Many folks are asking that. What are the characteristics of this refrigerant versus 134?
Yeah. To get into real great detail, I can't do that. I can just tell you it's very similar to what 134a is. I mean, I know in the case of the Daimler incident that happened in September of 2012, that was a 1234 YF system, and they basically put in 134 in those systems without, making real modifications to it. There might be some pressure switch changes that are minor, but by and large, it works very similar in terms of how it exchanges heat.
Is it also similar in its molecular structure for the leak concerns? How the molecules are?
Yeah, that's a good one. I haven't heard anything about that, whether it's more likely to leak. Kind of such as I'm assuming was to make it sort of analogous to when R22 might leak out of a system because of smaller molecular structure.
Then one of the other questions is how soon do the manufacturers have to convert their fleets, the production vehicles, over to the new 1234YF?
There's no hard and fast deadline for how soon they need to convert over, but the sooner that they do, the sooner that they will accrue those fuel economy credits, I guess, which go up through 2016. So, but obviously they're not going to do this any quicker than they can get refrigerant to make it happen and make it cost effective to make that switch.
Another candidate or another technician asked if ASE will be offering training in these systems, and the answer to that is that only training we have really is the information in the 609, correct?
That's right. By federal law, our program is supposed to be a technician training and certification program. We don't really call it certification because it's not like our regular certification, but nonetheless, there's a heavy emphasis on the training. So anything that's going to be covered on the quiz will need to be covered in the book. And Dan, let me add one other thing to that. Just to clear up any confusion with ASE certification for like heating and air conditioning, A7, that does not cover working on motor vehicle air conditioning systems as far as the MVAC 609 requirement for federal law. That's a broader test, and EPA wanted a more specific, program, even though I understand it's open book, but the content is designed specifically for that purpose. So I want to make sure that I clear that up, because sometimes people think that because they have heating and air conditioning that it does cover them for the Section 609 requirement. It does not.
Any idea what the Y and the F in the designation?
No, I think that's probably a chemist thing. Sorry, no help on that one. It can also, by the way, go by HFO or R-1234YF. Either one is acceptable.
And I have several questions again about the retrofitting, and we really can't, it's not for retrofitting. That's what's coming down the pike. That's
right.
What's said, right?
Right.
So those questions really, that has to be answered somewhere else. Okay, that's not us. And again, there's also a lot of questions about global warming and the discussion about how this chemical will affect the environment, and we can't answer that. That's not our expertise.
No, that's why I let off at the beginning of this. That
yeah.
I can't really speak to that research. I'm not trying to be evasive about it. Again, I'm really not. It's really about what we're told we have to do our job. Dan,
and again, they're asking. Go ahead.
I believe you had somebody ask about a service fitting for a 1234 system. Is that correct?
Yeah, they wanted to see what the service fittings look like.
Okay.
It's just an idea. Also, many of these folks are asking questions specific to the flammability of the system. What are the risks? We addressed that earlier. They're asking about when it's burned, what happens with it. That's not our expertise. Okay.
Right.
So.
Yep.
And that,
I'm going to see if I can get you a picture here real quick, Dan.
Sounds good. And again, you will need specific equipment when you're dealing with 1234YF systems. That does require a specific equipment dedicated to that refrigerant. Okay.
Right. Recovery, recycling. Refrigerant recovery, recycling equipment. Leak detection is going to require equipment for that too. You're likely going to be seeing, again, dual refrigerant machines. I think that might help some people. But yes, definitely going to require that kind of equipment.
And then just to be clear, the 609 certification is required for anybody working on mobile air conditioning systems in these vehicles, correct, Dave?
That's right.
So
Now,
whether
federal
it's
law says for consideration, which means if you're being paid something or if you're bartering something. That's what for consideration means. And sometimes we get this question by people in a classroom, you know. So a student really isn't doing it for hire, he's learning, but the teacher would be. Okay, you're looking at a 1234 service fitting now. Everybody can see that.
now one of the questions here is leak detection. Do the leak detectors function in the same manner, Dave, or the same equipment?
Yeah, pretty much the same thing. And again, it's going to be electronic and it's going to be dye. Those are going to be the two. I believe the SAE standard actually reaches over both 1234 and 134 as far as the dye composition to make sure it's okay. But on the electronic side of it, as far as the design of the electronic leak detector for 1234, that's a different standard. And there's also an associated technician performance standard for how you use that electronic leak detector, the rate at which you move the probe, the distance that you keep the probe from suspected leaks, things like that are covered in it. So you can see on a 1234 system, the protective cap is gray. On 134 systems, it's black. This is a Jeep, brand new Jeep Cherokee here, that new design Jeep Cherokee we're looking at, 2014 here.
Do you have both fittings available, Dave? By
Yeah,
chance?
probably do.
And I have several questions we're asking, have concerns on how to address contamination, what are the concerns, what are the hazards, vehicle hazards associated with contamination with different refrigerants in the system. That's really information that you'll get from more training related to the technical side of the systems, not really the regulatory side.
I mean, abnormal system pressures, obviously, things like that are likely going to happen. It's going to depend, somewhat on, what exact percentage of what do you have in there. How much of that one do you have with this one over here is going to, cause the abnormal performance. So I think that's really it. The main thing is despite the percentages that you might have, the key thing is to contain that one that's got that viral, rogue blend. You don't want to get that in other cars, that's for sure.
Justin keeps asking over and over, wants to know about the functionality of the PAG oil in the 1234YF versus 134A system. Dave, is that something that we can address in this webinar?
Nope, all I know is that that's the recommended oil. I can't tell you any more than that.
Several of the, Mike is asking, as well as other people, will the PowerPoint or the webinar be available for later consumption?
Yeah, those of you that have attended tonight's session, as well as those that weren't able to make tonight's session, will be getting a follow-up email that will show you where you can go and view the archived version of this session.
And then some of the folks have asked if there's projections on the cost of this new system or its individual components. Do you have any idea of that yet, Dave?
No, I don't. I mean, that really sounds like it's more of an OE type of question.
And I mean, it seems like the questions now are turning very much more towards the technical side. Are the O-rings compatible with between the two systems, 134 and 1234? The Schrader valves replaceable, and the serviceability of the system. That's really more focused on the regulatory side of this and some of the differences between the serviceability of this system specific to the SAE regulations.
Yeah, I mean, you're getting into the service procedures and all that kind of stuff that's in service information. And I'm not trying to say that it's not out there, but that's a little bit outside of my purview in terms of that side of it yet. Even the stuff we're looking at tonight is still, believe it or not, leading edge in a lot of ways. Here's the other fitting on the Cherokee. And this is the vehicle that's got that interesting, it's got the heat exchanger type line on it where they run one line inside another with a set of radial fins to actually do some heat exchange right in the line itself. It's kind of wild. So it's a quick coupler design, obviously. I mean, quick couplers are nice because they take the ability to leave shutoff valves open out of the user's hands, right? Yeah, folks, I wish I had a lot more information on you in terms of the exact specifics, you know, the drill down inside each one of these systems. It's pretty fascinating stuff, it really is. See some real interesting questions in here. I'll probably learn more by looking at your questions that you proposed us tonight.
Yeah, it does, you know, there are a lot of technical questions. I mean, this is the question pane is blowing up with questions about how much is a refrigerant charge? Is it less volume of refrigerant in the systems as compared to the 134 systems?
I mean, the trend overall is towards smaller system charges. There's no question about that. Let's take a look here once on this. Okay, on that, the Jeep Cherokee that you see the fittings for on the screen right now, that system charge on that vehicle is 482 grams or 1.062 pounds. So about a pound of refrigerant.
The list of vehicles that you had, Dave, earlier in the presentation,
Yes.
how is that compiled?
That's compiled by what was released at the MAX convention this year from Ward Atkinson, who does the State of the Industry report.
All right, again, unfortunately, you know, the technical information regarding the efficiency of the 134a versus 1234YF, those are questions we can't answer. Okay,
but here's a place where maybe you can go and get it, okay? Perhaps this is a place you can go get some of that stuff. DuPont has a lot of information, okay? I'm not trying to be, you know, pardon me. I'm not trying to push DuPont on anybody. It's just that they happen to make the refrigerant and they happen to have a lot of the information about it. And I think you're going to find some of that information on their site. It's that smartautoac.com. Just like if you're interested in CO2 refrigerant information at r744.com.
And just to be clear, I'm not concerned that, you know, I don't want to hurt you guys by not answering your technical questions, but you're asking technical questions regarding the systems, and it's tricky for us because we can't answer those. You're not being difficult at all. It's just that the seminar is about something else, and unfortunately there's a lot of other questions related to the 609 process, and I'm getting lost in the technical trying to find those. But can a technician get into legal trouble if they don't have a Section 609 cert, Dave?
Yes. And it would be an embarrassing thing to have happen. It really would. Typically, the EPA every year does a sting or two here and there, and they make it public. And they'll go and they'll nail some people and fine them. I don't know how much it is, but I know it hurts. You just wouldn't want to have that happen to you.
And another question is, will the ASE certification exams, the credentialing program, will that affect the new regulations that are coming out? And as the new systems become more and more prevalent, the ASE exams will then start including those questions to those systems on the exams. It's driven by your peers, and also, most ASE test questions deal with content that's between you'll see on vehicles between 5 and 10 years old. But yes, that eventually will be on there. The issue is that you don't want to discriminate or disadvantage technicians that aren't seeing that. And earlier there was a comment from a attendee that said, you're going to, in the aftermarket, you'll start seeing these systems in about 5 years, and that maybe sooner for shops that specialize in air conditioning or work on newer vehicles. But that could be correct.
Right. I think that's fair.
And one of the attendees says that they see the resources, but they want to know where they go to get their 609 certification or to get technical training to help for the actual working on the vehicles. Now, I think you should explain what the 609 certification program entails, Dave, about the product that ASE produces, so that they understand, what's actually happening there, what that 609 actually covers. Can you do that?
Yeah, I think that's a pretty fair question, because a lot of times since I work on it day in and day out, I assume that everybody knows. But then again, I do get phone calls every day that proves to me the otherwise. You see a picture on your screen here, Refrigerant Recovery and Recycling Program for Section 609. That's our current print booklet that you see on the screen. We have a counterpart of that is on the web where you can actually take the quiz online. And I can take you to that site real quick and just show you real fast. But the whole premise behind this, as I said earlier, is that the EPA wants this to be both a combination of training and taking the quiz. So it's not just go take the quiz and finish it. They want you to actually learn something along the way, and a lot of this stuff is tied in environmental regs and the standards with SAE, a lot of the topics that I've touched on tonight, the different refrigerants and health and safety and some of those sorts of things. But we've done the paper booklet since 1992. Again, we've done it a long, long time. And we have a learning management site. It's asecampus.com. I'll pull it up here real quick for you. Okay, so at asecampus.com right now, what we have is we have two products that we currently feature on here. We have the online refrigerant recovery and recycling program, and we have an e-learning program called Introduction to Automobile Service e-learning program. Again, and both of these are totally online. Again, the refrigerant one does have a paper component that you can take it that way, but here online you can take the quiz. You can go through it. It's a 30-question quiz. You review the educational information. Provided you pass it, then you get a temporary certificate that you could print out right online, and we mail you your permanent certificate and wallet card out of our offices here in Leesburg, Virginia. That's how the program works. You need to create a profile to log in the system, and from there you can, again, take the program directly. We also have a kind of a neat program for employers. If they have multiple technicians that they want to get covered underneath this program, you can buy electronic vouchers where you go in, you make a bulk purchase, and you can distribute those electronic coupons to your technicians as you see fit. We try to have different information on here to answer people's questions before they even go and take the program. And right here I'm pulling up the EPA fact sheet that they make available so that you can quickly, visually see what it is that you need to do in order to comply with federal law. So we have that on here. Here's the little visual that you saw earlier that I featured, where I snipped that out of there. But it talks about what Section 609 covers. And so that's what we got at ASE campus. That's what happens there. Again, we've got FAQs. This talks about payment and security. Really, the whole thing is covered. Almost anything you want to know. We got a whole support section. It's all right there, and it's all done online. What else we got, Dan?
Dave, sorry. I just want to be clear that the current 609 certification does not have an expiration date, correct?
Right. At this moment in time, that is true. But I will say keep checking and keep checking and keep asking that question, because that could change.
Does the 609 certification apply to like the school buses and transit buses, Dave?
It can, as long as that air conditioning system, is substantially identical to that of a motor vehicle air conditioning system, and it doesn't use R22.
So the ASE A7, T7, S7 exams that are the heating and air conditioning for the school bus, medium heavy truck, automobile, H7, transit bus, those are a totally different credential. Those are a certification through ASE for the diagnosis and repair of the systems. The 609 is a federal credential, or is federal certification, correct?
Right, and on the ASE certifications that you mentioned, it gets into maybe a little bit of the things covering the environmental regulation part, but not enough to specifically cover it by federal law.
Again, if you've taken a 609 credential and you have it, there's no need to retake it, correct?
There's no need to retake it as far as a legal requirement. We do have users, however, that take it just because they're aware of the content changes that have come along since 1992 and forward. You have people that just say, I know I've got people in the system that have done it 5 times because they just want to make sure they've covered the latest content.
And if we work on heavy equipment, that's a 608, correct?
Not necessarily. It can be a 609 if it just cools the cab of that, like earth mover it showed earlier. That can be 609 because the air conditioning system is the same. But if it, you get in like a lot of these where they have like a roof mount unit, a lot of those are R22, and then it's uncovered.
Are government fleets exempt from these regulations, Dave?
That's a good question.
So we don't know the answer to that, correct?
No, I don't.
Okay, James, can't help you there. Or pardon me, Paul. Do we need a 609 credential to buy a small can of refrigerant, and do we need it to buy a large can of refrigerant?
Well, the original sales restriction was on 12, right? That's what the original sales restriction was put on. And then it applies now to 134 on large cylinders. The sales restriction on 1234, I don't know where that stands right now because that was all over the place. I mean, the only people that are going to be buying, a 10-pound cylinder of 1234 are going to be those that are right now probably working in a dealership.
One of the things that was brought up is that for technical training, there are a lot of options. Manufacturer-specific training through your manufacturer, vendor-specific training through a parts supplier or a vendor group. Then there's also training at the technical college. So those are some ideas if you need technical training related to systems and the latest systems and how to perform diagnosis and repair. Those are areas where you can go to find that information and further your knowledge of these systems.
Yeah, I think you covered it, Dan. I don't know what to add to that.
currently, do you know if the sales are restricted? For, in some areas they are, like California, they have restrictions for refrigerant purchases. Correct? I don't want to make a stupid statement, but
yes, they do. Right.
yeah. So some areas, like for instance, in some areas you're required to have a credential or show them some type of certification. Other areas, that's not a true statement. Correct?
I'm sorry, Dan. Repeat that last part one more time.
Some areas, it's not a true statement that you need some type of certification to purchase. You can walk in somewhere and buy that.
The thing that I always say to everybody is there's always going to be some local exceptions to anything that the federal law does. I gave that example earlier of Wisconsin, how they dropped that. Everybody needs to have their law at least as stringent as what the federal law dictates. Like some areas of the country allow you to top off. Other areas, there were some exceptions to allowing you to top off. They didn't want you to top off systems at all. You get into that type of stuff.
Back to the some of the concerns over the chemicals themselves. Several folks have posted links to MSDS resources at Honeywell and other manufacturers that discuss the specifics of the chemicals. So the MSDS, or I think they're now SDSs, right? Safety data
right.
sheets, I think they call them. So that's where you can go for those type of resources.
Yeah, I know DuPont has a lot of stuff over on their site. And I hope that it's able to answer some of your questions when you get into chemical structure and the environmental fallout and some of those types of questions. For those of you that either may or may not have seen it, I don't know, I sent a message to the entire audience because I got an answer about what's the difference in the evaporator for 1234. Well, it applies to 744 as well. They have to meet a new SAE standard, J2842. It's a more sturdy evaporator because of the mild flammability that's in 1234. They want that to be a component that meets a more rigorous type of design standard. So any evaporator that's going to go in those systems has to meet that standard.
Now, there's some questions regarding specific vehicles, like for instance, is Mercedes going to install 1234YF in any North American vehicles, and are they still pursuing R744? There was one of the attendees had posted that in their particular environment, the 134 or 1234YF was retrofitted to 134 at their manufacturer, which involved changing the service fittings, a glove box note, and an underhood decal, and that was done. Unfortunately, that attendee has left, so I can't get a response back from him, but that was a Mercedes dealer technician. So the answer to that is, I don't know the answer to it, but obviously they've changed backwards for some reason.
Well, I think that, Dan, that stems from that September 2012 situation where they think they had a 180 sedan getting in an accident over in Europe, and they claimed that there was a fire related to it. And I don't know. I can't speak for the research. I just go by what we follow in that. And at that point, Mercedes, Daimler parent company, did issue a statement that said that they were going to remove from the cars that they had installed 1234 and were going to put 134 back in out of the interest of safety to their customers. Okay. And that's what they did. And to my knowledge, they are now, like the rest of the German manufacturers, working on CO2.
Yeah, and now I don't have many questions that are being asked specifically to the regulations. Now it's again the technical, how the systems operate, the longevity of the 1234 system, what makes refrigerants flammable, and then is it flammable under certain pressures or when presented to flames or sparks. those are questions we can't answer for you. That's where technical training will get you in the right direction there.
Right.
And yeah. Tom asked if can anybody take the online course on 609, and the answer to that is yes. It's fine for you to take a course. I mean, Tom says he works in retail and enjoys the learning process. Well, that's important. Yes, you can.
That's correct.
If a candidate or if a attendee has lost their certification, Tim asks, can he get another certification card, or does he need to retake the test? And the answer to that is, if their certification is on file with MAX or with any of the organizations that MAX has brought in-house, and they have those records, they can reproduce their certification for you. There's a fee involved in that. And ASE can do the same thing. If you've taken it through ASE, we can do the same thing as well, provide you that certificate so that you can have a copy of it. And Dave, how would we go about doing that at ASE?
Yeah, there's a form section on the ASE.com website. There's also right on ASEcampus.com. There's a duplicate credentials form, and I'll just pull it up real quick. You fill this out, submit it with the appropriate fee, and then we'll get you a dupe.
What comes with that when I receive my credential? What do I get? When I get my certificate?
You're going to get a certificate, and you are going to get a wallet card.
And again, the ASE A7, H7 for transit bus, T7, and S7, those AC exams for those vehicles do not count as 609. The 609 is a federal certificate and requirement. The diagnosis and repair exam that ASE has is not.
That's correct. All right, Dan, I guess we better wrap it up here. I want to thank everybody for attending tonight, and on behalf of Dan Baumhart and myself, we appreciated your attendance tonight and your engaging questions and feedback that you've given us. We hope that some of this at least has been helpful for you. We wish that we could have answered every one of your technical related questions in this. We'll keep swinging at it. This is a topic that is always our number one when it comes to the webinars. You can bet to look for this going forward, and changes that come up in the industry, we'll be passing them on to you the best we can. And again, on behalf of ASE, Dan Baumhart, and myself, Dave Kappert, thank you for attending tonight's session on refrigerants.
And Dave, if I want to view this again, where can I get it again?
They're going to get an email, and it will have a link in it that will show them where they can go and see the recorded version.
Thank you, Dave. Appreciate it, and thanks to those.
Good night, everyone.